the sensor inside is already taking vertical photos. So everything is happening vertical. Even if you're holding the camera normally, everything is vertical. So if you want horizontal stuff, you actually have to twist the camera.
So weird.
But it is a bit weird.
What has the world come to? You hold a camera horizontally
in order to take vertical photos.
In order to take vertical video or photos.
That's right.
What's new in filmmaking technology this week? News, reviews, education, insights, opinions, and ideas from the CineD newsroom with Nino Leitner and Johnny Bahiri. This is Focus Check, the weekly Cinetech podcast.
Welcome to episode 65 of CineD Focus Check podcast. Welcome, Johnny.
Hello, Nino. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well. Actually, quite busy before CineGear, and we are also working on future camera reviews and other reviews. So it's just very busy. But you know what I found out? 24 hours a day is not enough. How about you?
Yeah, I think even if it was 48 hours, it wouldn't be enough. It's
crazy. And then our wives will call us workaholics, which is, of course, not true.
Never. Actually, this week, we didn't have any, I would say, major filmmaking-related camera releases. Apart from last week, of course, where we talked about the Mavic 4 Pro
and the LUMIX
S1 II and S1 IIe. But we had an introduction of a new FUJIFILM camera, which we'll start with. I'll just give a quick overview of what we talk about. So We'll start talking about the FUJIFILM X1/2, which is, I would say, it's really the analog workflow brought to the digital age for creators.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really for our audience in the sense of it's not for filmmakers, but you know what? That's one of those cameras that really made me personally excited.
Yeah, but before we dive into this, let me give the overview of what else we're going to talk about today. We'll mention Sony camera sales. Actually, I dove into their quarterly reports of their Q4, which their financial Q4 2024 actually ended end of March 25, which is confusing, but that's how they report.
It's a Japanese...
no, it's not Japanese. I mean, every company can have a different, like an offset year. But anyway, so this is about their camera sales in early 2025. We'll just talk about that. I'll mention a little review reel I did about a camera plate for the Ronin 4D from a company called Rolux, not Rolex, Rolux. Which is quite cool. We also talk about their new gold mount batteries. We'll mention ARRI selling Claypaky and what that means and why they did that. We'll mention a new ARRI AI extension for DaVinci Resolve and what we think about that.
It's not only DaVinci Resolve. It's for Adobe Premiere, Final Cut, and DaVinci Resolve. Actually, it's three of those.
Okay, but this one is new. The Premiere was there already. The DaVinci plugin was announced a week ago. Then we had a Sennheiser releasing a single-channel version of their profile wireless audio, which we reported about at NAB. But actually, the exciting part is that they simply give it a firmware update to support 32-bit float. Suddenly,
finally.
Well, you can do this with a firmware update, apparently. Then new cage for the new LUMIX S1R2 and S1 IIe cameras from Tilta. An educational article we published about different types of tracking shots and what emotions they evoke. A new Laowa 15mm f4.5 macro lens. Panasonic offering 5-year extended warranty on LUMIX S camera, which sounds cool. Firmware updates to Leica SL3 and SL3S. A plugin for Premiere called OCTOPUS RAW, which actually gives you more advanced RAW video workflow capabilities within Premiere. And we published a half-hour interview with Steadicam operator Sean Flannery, who has worked on the Super Bowl halftime show, on Taylor Swift concerts. I mean, a lot of
high-profile productions.
Very high-profile productions, high-pressure environment. And our friend Graham Sheldon did an amazing interview with him, which you definitely should check out. And then NANLITE announcing a Bowens mount projection attachment, which is quite cool for some of the lights. DaVinci Resolve 20 Beta 4. And I think that's it. That's kind of
more
like
than enough. Yeah.
more than enough. And let's start off with the Fujifilm X1/2 camera. So Johnny, what do we make of this camera? So it looks like an old rangefinder, actually not dissimilar to their, I would say, X106.
If I was Fujifilm, I would have marketed this as my first Fujifilm camera. This is such an amazing blend between the Instax, which I just bought my daughter, and we know what it can do, and a digital way to take photos and also control those photos. The thing is, and I'll try to explain. So you will literally take half a photo per time, and then you can add another one. And this can happen on the camera itself or later with the X1/2 app that will be introduced when the camera is out. It's a little bit hard to explain and actually also to think about it, but the sensor inside is already taking vertical photos. So everything is happening vertical. Even if you're holding the camera normally, everything is vertical. So if you want horizontal stuff, you actually have to twist the camera.
So weird.
But it is a bit weird.
What has the world come to? You hold a camera horizontally
in order to take vertical photos.
In order to take vertical video or photos.
That's right.
It's so confusing.
And the person behind the idea, his name is Ueno-san, and he is a designer, product designer at Fujifilm. And personally, I would like to meet him, shake his hand, and also conduct an interview, because I think, it's really nice that those type of ideas are coming from within the company.
They're really thinking out of the box, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And then
inside the box, inside the camera box, but outside the box.
Exactly. And then it's not enough to think about the idea. It's really nice that the management at Fujifilm actually decided that this is such a great idea. Let's do it.
But honestly, let's do a quick disclaimer here. You guys might know that Fujifilm is sponsoring a lot of episodes of this podcast, but that's seriously not why we are talking about this. We would talk about this anyway, right? I mean, it's like they have no influence whatsoever on the content of this podcast, and it's just
we maintain really good working relationship like with other manufacturers. But in this regard, and again, this is not a camera targeted specifically to our audience. I think if we jump out of the we're always reviewing cameras and so on. Just think about the idea and implementing it. And in such a crowded market, it's nice to see whether it's thinking out of the box.
Well, they have really proved, I mean, in general, they're really after finding a lot of different niches in the camera market. I mean, we have the GFX RF, 100 RF, which is different. Crazy. It's like a fixed lens, medium format / large format camera, which is unique. We have the X106, which is, I mean, incredibly popular, and also in a different way. I mean, it's not interchangeable, it's also fixed lens actually.
Yeah,
right. But it's
both of them.
But it's a larger sensor than this.
Which one now? Sorry.
Well, the X106 is APS-C, right?
That's right. And the GFX 100 RF is medium format or large format, as you said.
Yeah, and all fixed lens.
This specific one is a fixed lens camera. It's very lightweight. It's 240 grams. The sensor size is 1 inch only, and there are hardly any physical buttons. Yeah, it's really, you have a USB connector, a single one. You can see on the top there's some stuff. Even the EVF. It's not an EVF. It's a just optical viewfinder,
like from a rangefinder camera.
Exactly. And then the two LCD screens at the back. The left one will show you the film simulation that you are using, which is so quite nice.
For those actually listening to this podcast, this is a little window that looks exactly like the little cutout window you have on analog cameras, which would show you what kind of film you have loaded into your analog camera. And now this is a display which looks like a little little extended pill shape that will show you the kind of film simulation you select within the camera, right?
That's right. And then the main LCD screen is actually for operating the camera. You sweep up, down, left, right, and all of this. And
which is a vertical screen at the back of the camera.
That's right. So the idea is, again, in general, that you will take one photo and then you kind of wind the
You wind it,
and
lever,
then exactly, and then you can take the second photo. So, and it's not only photos; you can also combine photos and videos later also in the app. So, I think you can create something very artistic and very, very different.
So we have a video playing here, which is actually which was created in camera, which is showing 2 vertical videos and sometimes 2 vertical photos, or 1 photo and 1 video next to each other. And you can do this inside the camera.
That's right. And for those who are asking about video, because of course we are mostly focusing about video, so the only format here will be Full HD in 24p, up to 50 megabit per second. So it's not high quality, but I think for the market that it's serving and what you wanna, because at the end you want to end up, of course, in social media, I think it's perfect. Now it will have 13 film simulations that you can choose from, but you will also be able to later to add 3, or actually film or take photos with 3 additional kind of light leak, expired film, and halation. And you will not be able to see those effects when you take the photo, only afterwards. Pretty much like we in the old days in analog. So,
and you select one of them first?
You select first, but you will not be able to see the outcome. You can also use some...
While you're shooting. I mean, you see once you're done.
Exactly. And then, of course, you are also able to have some Instax simulations, kind of, or effects, let's call it, which gives quite a lot of possibilities to play with. In all honesty, if I knew in time that this camera is coming, I would definitely consider to buy this to my kids and also for myself. I mean, it's very small and it's very nice to play with. But for now, I'm with the Instax. Speaking of which, you are able to connect your Instax printer wirelessly to this camera and then print the photos. And not only that, you will have a dedicated app, X-Half app, and it will look like, you'll have the film stripe, and that's where you're kind of developing the photos and the videos that you took, and you will be able also to combine there what you want in order to output like a final digital file. So I think all in all, Fujifilm really were thinking out of the box. And what else? Let me see if I missed.
It's cool. I mean, it's just basically they're taking with every one of the new cameras, they're kind of trying to put the creativity back into the camera, right? And kind of away from the computer. You do as much of the creation in camera. And we've heard it, and I've mentioned it many times before. When Victor from Fujifilm, Victor Ha, was here, he mentioned actually that people want, especially the Gen Z creators, people in their 20s and younger, they want now a simple device that does less than their smartphone because they grew up with a smartphone. They're doing everything through the smartphones. They actually appreciate a device that does less, that actually limits them in a way that they can be creative within those limitations. And that's another good example of where they are really executing this.
I mean, this is all the way. Even you can select a camera like the roll, how many photos you want to take, 36, 54, 72.
And what happens afterwards? You have to throw it away, or
no,
you have to recharge it?
No. But by the way, also I think important to say that you have a built-in LED.
But you don't have to go to the Fujifilm web store to pay for another virtual roll of film.
But that could be a business model. You actually give the camera for less money and then charge for those digital rolls. But yeah. So all in all, I think they did really well, and I think it really. Let me just check for how much it's going to be sold for. $850, and it will be available during June 2025. So. Yeah, guys, something new, something really out of the box. It will be very interesting to follow up if that's a beginning of something.
It's smart of them. Of course, we know that their most successful camera is the Instax camera by far, and then I guess after that it's the X106, and this really positions this in between.
It's a bridge camera. It's perfect for
those
that.
two, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, for people who like the Instax, who kind of. And they want to pull them kind of to the digital side, but not overload them with functionality. And it's very easy for people like us as professionals to dismiss something like that, to be honest, because from our perspective, it's very limited in what you can do. But if you look at those people, right, the consumer market, people who are just want to have a fun camera to go with, it absolutely makes sense in my opinion.
I'm actually very curious to see how the Japanese market will adopt this camera, because Instax is really big in the Japanese market, and of course I want to see also how the international market will react, and then compare the strength of those markets next to the Chinese market, because Chinese people, they love those type of gadgets. And let's see.
Well, for our social media content at the next trade shows, we can consider using a camera like this, right?
I would be very happy actually
just social media. I'm not even talking about interviews. I'm just talking about extra, like impressions from events and stuff like that.
We will be able to probably create a 30 seconds reels, whatever, have the photo of the product on left hand side,
exactly.
And on the right hand side have the...
the reel has to be vertical, so you have to, but still, I mean...
I'm sure there will be ways to work with this and create something funny and fun. Good.
Yeah, actually, I want to connect this to something kind of... What?
Before, I want to connect it to the poll that we are running.
Oh, yeah.
Because the poll this week is all about camera innovation. And the question that we are asking is, which camera manufacturer you think is the most innovative one? We will give, of course, there's a selection of most of the manufacturers that we know, the Japanese manufacturers. And
also the non-Japanese ones.
Well, that's going to be more about.
Design.
That's going to be more. You know what? We can open it. It's not a problem. I can add also, because I thought originally to make it more about mirrorless cameras, but of course we can add Blackmagic design, and it will be interesting to see what you guys think about this. Which camera manufacturer is currently the most innovative one? Okay, good.
I want to connect this with something unconnected-ish, simply because it reminded me of the Sony camera sales report. And I try to, sometimes we rarely report about this stuff, but actually we figured recently that it makes sense for us to dive into those reports by these big corporations, simply in order to identify what works and what doesn't work financially for them in their camera sector, right? And lenses sector and imaging sector, because of course, this will always be a sign of things to come down the road. And looking at the Sony quarterly results for their Q4 24, which actually ended end of March because of their offset business year, it's interesting. Of course, Sony being a huge electronics giant, the cameras and imaging divisions are just a tiny part of their overall business. Don't forget, they do PlayStation. They have Sony Pictures as a movie studio. They have so many other consumer products. They still have TVs and a lot of other things. And, the camera thing is actually within one of those divisions. So it's not so easy to identify. But what I was able to find out, which is interesting, in general, their consumer products seem to be under pressure, like everywhere. Like we see in general, consumer products are, of course, the most competitive ones, because there's a lot of manufacturers making consumer products. And of course, in this case, it means TVs, other appliances, all kind of Sony things you can think of that are, like that your mom would use too. And this is a sector that is very much under pressure. However, we see a very clear trend that the high-end imaging segment within Sony seems quite resilient and is actually still growing in a very difficult economic time, right? In general, I mean, we have the whole tariff situation, which is adding uncertainty because, of course, most of the electronics are made in Asia and specifically Japan and China. Some of it in other countries, but still, we see the troubles ahead there. But in general, it was interesting to see that the high-end imaging specifically is what's growing for Sony. So I think this is a clear, and we saw it with recent Sony announcement, right? I mean, the most recent camera announcement was the Venice Mini extension unit, which we saw that people are really, I mean, we just, like we posted.
The reel was crazy.
We posted, also the YouTube video, but the reel had over 1 million views. And I was like, when I was at this Sony event in London, I was like, okay, this is a really niche thing. It's kind of the smaller version of the Rialto extension unit for Venice. And of course, I mean, it's great for those people who are working with a Venice, but it's really niche. I mean, you need literally a Venice 2, and then you need to purchase this thing, which is $25,000.
But that means that people really, they want and they're looking for new Sony devices.
They're craving for new Sony cameras. And we all know that now we are at a time where, like a lot of manufacturers like Panasonic and even Canon and Fujifilm have recently updated a lot of their lineup, and Sony with the Alpha series and the FX series, people are waiting. They have the biggest user base in terms of like people using those cameras, and I think a lot of people are holding out purchases because they want to upgrade their Sony cameras, and we're waiting. Like everybody's waiting, and you can see from the business reports that this is the high end is working best for. And when I say high end, I don't only mean, of course, the Venice stuff. I mean any camera, and I think that's what's grouped as high end in this report.
Not a mirrorless, you mean?
That is, well, yeah,
also the mirrors,
but the more expensive ones.
Okay.
Not like we know that as opposed to Fujifilm, Sony doesn't really focus anymore on entry-level cameras. We have hardly any entry-level cameras, right? Which were compact cameras with a fixed lens and stuff like that. I don't even know if there's many in the lineup still. But we see this focus on the FX line. We see this focus on the Alpha line, Alpha 1 Mark II, all of those A9 and so on. So this seems to be working well for them, and this is also still growing. Also, one thing that we shouldn't forget, a huge business for Sony, much bigger than their own camera business, is actually the sensors. Selling sensors to other manufacturers. And that is, there's never any official confirmation of that, but we know that there's a very limited amount of sensor manufacturers in the world, and also some of the other major camera makers, presumably Panasonic, and for example, some others, Nikon are working with Sony sensors and others too, but particularly smartphone manufacturers. This is where the money is, because it's simply the volume that they are selling. I mean, and this shows also in this report, this is growing quite a lot. And you have a lot of sensor sales into the smartphone sectors to all kinds of manufacturers. Of course, not disclose which ones they are, but most likely Apple, Samsung, others are using Sony sensors in many of their smartphones. But in general, I also embedded in this report a talk we did a couple of years ago at IBC with Nobu-san, who's the head of the cinema line division within Sony. And if you watch this now again, and I did, it's very interesting to see, their focus, also where things are moving. So let's see what this year brings for Sony. I think everybody's excited for new stuff, but it's always good to get an overview of those things by looking at those reports, because I think it's kind of giving you a hint at what works for them and where they might look at, well, actually, maybe we need to do a little bit more in this field, so things enhance there.
Yeah, I think we covered also the Canon. I think it was a month or 2 months ago. You also wrote an article about Canon, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it's really worth, because this is all public information. It's not that we have to invent anything.
Yeah, they're
a public company, so that's
exactly. It's very technical information. That's why you really have to be very specific to find out stuff that's relevant to our industry. But in general, also with Canon, we saw the trend that the high-end stuff works for both Sony and Canon in that way very similarly. And it's clear that companies like Fujifilm are trying to carve out niches for themselves within this field that is very much dominated by these very big companies. We'll be back after this message from our sponsor.
1 Minute Tips by Fujifilm and CineD. Another part of our series on film set roles. Let's talk about the second assistant director or second AD. While the first AD manages the set, the second AD works behind the scenes to keep everything organized and running smoothly. Their main job? Creating and distributing the call sheet, the daily schedule that tells cast and crew where they need to be. They also coordinate talent movement, making sure actors get through hair, makeup, and wardrobe on time. And if you have a lot of extras on set, they are the ones in charge of coordinating their placement and performances. Think of the second AD as the communication hub between the production office backend and everything else that happens on set. If you have a great second AD, chances are you will hardly even notice because they keep everything running so smoothly and seamlessly. Stay tuned for more film roll breakdowns. 1 minute tips. Until next time.
And now back to the show. Let's move on to actually a little review reel I made. I did a little reel about a new camera plate, which sounds maybe
Sounds
not
like a
too
plate.
exciting.
Exactly.
But
it is.
For those people who are using the Ronin 4D like me, you might know that the Ronin 4D actually relies on the TB50 batteries from DJI, which are LiPo batteries that were originally made for the Ronin 2. They're also used in the Inspire series. And now when they brought out the Ronin 4D, they also, incorporated these batteries within the Ronin. Now, I, for the longest time, didn't know that you can use V-mounts with this. I didn't know because there is actually different voltage. So you can, because the TB50, I think, are 26 volt batteries, so actually much higher than most of the V-mounts in the market, which are 14.4 volts. But it turns out it actually works also with 14.4 volt batteries. However, there are limitations. So for example, this plate actually can deal with both 14.4 and 26 volt V-mount batteries. So you can use those higher voltage V-mounts, which you should always be careful with, because of course, if you have a higher voltage V-mount, which is usually specifically made for lights, there are lights in the market that take this higher voltage. Like physically, you could attach them to any camera, but you would actually blow the fuses of the camera because it can't take, like many cameras cannot take the higher voltage. This camera can deal with both 26 and 14.4 volts and this plate too. So the plate can take both.
But then if you use the plate, you regain all functionality because you're talking about some limitations.
The limitation, which I haven't, I've not used it on a proper shoot yet with a 14.4 volt battery on the Rolux plate. However, there supposedly, if you have what takes the most power in the Ronin 4D is the Z-axis. That's the chicken head, if you will. The up and down movement that is kind of like, getting rid of your walking movements and so on. This takes the most power, particularly when it's booting up. But I didn't have any limitations when I was booting up. I was running around with it. It worked. However, and I've heard this from a couple of people, that can be if you mount this on an arm or you mount this on the car and there is heavier constant movement, this might not be enough. You might need the higher voltage battery for that. It does work, but at some point the movement might be too much. I haven't tested the limitation yet. But for normal walking stuff, I didn't have any problem, honestly. So I regret buying 2 of those TB50 batteries recently because they're not exactly cheap. And, it's LiPo. So your LiPo batteries at some point just, grow bigger. And when you see them kind of blowing up, you want to get rid of them because you need to exchange them for new ones.
So for the best of your knowledge, this is the only plate in the market that actually does this little trick?
No, I think there are other plates too, but there's not that many. And I've only found 1 or 2, like YouTube videos of other manufacturers making a plate. I don't know if all the plates actually supports both voltages, but basically I think it does because what all the plate does is it's connecting through the LEMO connector to the DC in, and that DC in has a range of 12 to 30 volts. So it's flexible. But it works. It depends, of course, how much can you add to the D tab and so on. I haven't also tried it with the wireless transmission system, which will also draw some power. So, but in general, I'm happy, like to have even if it's a backup solution, and it's also very easy to install. I mean, it's just a couple of M4 screws that you can literally attach within 10, 15 seconds.
And what's the price for this plate?
Easy. I think it's around $170. It's very easy. It's very cheap, and it's it has a heat dissipating design, which is important because I think I read about one other plate that was in the market, which I haven't tested, but that seems to overheat. And this one actually has a hollow design. You see some openings here on the side. So hot air can kind of come out, and it's all aluminum. So I guess it's good with that.
And they also use their own battery.
Yeah, they send us a battery too. I mean, I could use it with any battery, to be honest, as long as it can maintain a 15 amps current. So yeah, the Grand series seems to be couple different batteries. There is the Grand 1, which is more like, it seems to be a little bit more entry level, which has 45 watt in and 65 watt out. And then there's the Grand 2 and Grand 3 models, which are 60 watt in and 100 watt out. So you will have to get the bigger ones for the from this series if you want to have the 100 watt feature as well. But with all of them, you can use USB-C to charge the batteries. And they range between $210 for the Grand 1 and up to $520 for the Grand 3. So, this company, honestly, before we tested this, I haven't heard of Rolux. I always have to be careful not to say Rolex. But yeah, they seem to think about a lot of features that people want in their batteries in general. I think they're coming from the battery side and now are expanding into plates and stuff like that, which is interesting. Yeah. Good. Let's move on to some piece of news from ARRI. We reported about this a week ago. So, you know what Claypaky is?
Can't remember by heart, but they are making lights, no?
Yeah, but they are doing event lights. That's why they are not very much known in our industry. So really for big events in this field, they seem to be quite big. It's an Italian company.
They wrapped up their Eurovision Song Contest just now. They were involved in the...
They were in the... Well, I don't know if they did the main Eurovision Song Contest, but they did something in Finland on their finals. But anyway, Claypaky, which is funny, was only acquired by ARRI in 2022. And they're already selling it now again. I think it's a sign of, really focusing in our industry, which, as we all know, has a bit of a tough time in the high-end market with, everything that's happening in Hollywood and so on, and with the strikes and the aftermath of COVID and so on. A lot of the high-end companies like ARRI are trying to refocus onto their core business, which is making high-end cinema cameras and high-end cinema gear. And in that sense, they're selling stuff that's not really focused on that main market. And in this case, Claypaky, being an event lights manufacturer, is now being sold to EK Lights, which is a Chinese company, which is apparently big in this field too. They say it's going to stay in Italy. But yeah, so basically it was a very short-lived subsidiary by ARRI. At that time, I guess they were really, on the high of, being very successful with the Alexa-35 and a lot of productions happening. And now I think it's good to see that they're focusing on what they do best.
I'm kind of more curious because, again, it's another European company that is now owned by a Chinese company.
Yeah, I mean, it's
another sign of time.
Sign of the times. Let's talk about ARRI AI, which we've reported about before. So they recently announced a DaVinci Resolve extension for that virtual editing assistant.
It all came one after another. Within within 3 days, the DaVinci Resolve, the Premiere, and the Final Cut were announced. Because it really didn't justify three separate articles. So that's one article, but we also mentioned this in social media. It doesn't matter if you are Final Cut or Adobe Premiere user, you have now this.
So how does the integration work?
I haven't tried it, but the idea is that you can do, first of all, ARRI AI, just for those who are not familiar with the company or with the product, the idea is to have an assistant editor, basically. And what ARRI does, you can literally throw into the timeline, or now in the timeline, but before you could throw to ARRI, let's say 1 hour of footage and ask it to literally with a command prompt to isolate some segment from the interview that you want. For example, give me the highlights of whatever, and that will come up with whatever you want, and then you can either export vertically also to social media with titles, for example, asking it to even summarize more for a reel and so on. But this you always had, you were supposed to do this only from ARRI and I, and now with the extension, with the plugin, you can do this from within Premiere, DaVinci Resolve, or Final Cut Pro.
Okay, so it's basically, they say it's a little bit like ChatGPT for editing.
That's right.
Okay, so you can tackle your
I mean,
edits
we are in the beginning of working more and more with this just to see how it works for us. Also, with some of the videos that we are recording in exhibitions, we will definitely work with ARRI and I during CineGear. What I think I mentioned it before, but what we will attempt to do, use Fujifilm cameras, upload to Firmware, because Fujifilm was one of the first one to adopt camera to cloud. And then from that point on, within the cloud, let ARRI AI inject the footage from Frame.io and then instruct ARRI to actually sort out the interviews. The B-rolls that we have and also the main interview, and then either download XML file and refine within the editing, or literally export directly, let's say for social media, and say, hey, export 90 seconds vertical clip, and then upload this to our social media channel. So it's a bit of an experiment. We really want to see how it works, because if it does work as intended, of course, it can save a lot of time. And in all honesty, guys, it's not that we are sacrificing any position here. We were still, of course, using an editor. It's just to work on our efficiency, to work faster. Exactly, speeding things up. And let's see if it's work. I think it's a win-win situation for everybody.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I personally hate about editing is just the
logging part. Later.
The logging part, exactly. The time it takes until I get to a point where I'm actually able to edit. That's what I despise. It's just literally, and I'm the worst procrastinator when it comes to editing my own stuff up until I'm at that point. And then I'm really fast. Like I know, and I'm sure you're the same, right? You know what you want. And it's like,
it depends on the project.
It depends, of course. If it's more story-based, like a lot of your short documentaries are, it takes more time even afterwards, of course. But just this logging part and just finding the best clip of whatever it is, and that's yeah.
But not only that, imagine you're filming a convention, and I'm sure that some of the people who are following us are just simply for living doing conventions, and then you have this speaker talking for 1.5 hours, and then imagine if you can literally ask ARRI, can you please shorten it for 10 minutes, give the highlights and so on, and ARRI will help you to do this. So you're already able to give your client something to watch, and if they want more or less, doesn't matter, but it's possible. And I think that can be a big thing.
I think the real game changer will be once a system like this, and hopefully maybe it is ARRI, will be able to match the B-roll to what is spoken in an interview.
This is very, very demanding.
Yeah.
It's very demanding to let any software, doesn't matter, to identify visually what you are talking about, and then be able to put it on the timeline.
That's tough, yeah.
Let's say if you say, okay, use only once, like where to put it, because that's where the connotation works here.
Yeah.
So I'm sure. Well, sure.
With the speed at which things are moving,
exactly.
It's probably in 2 months.
But I'm sure that some companies are working on this, and let's see what will be the outcome of this.
Good. Let's move on to Sennheiser. Sennheiser, we reported about the profile wireless audio system at NAB. Now, the interesting part, of course, was that Sennheiser, as a high-end audio company, was really late to the game when it comes to having those more affordable, more creator-targeted wireless audio transmitters, right? I mean, we've seen those from Rode, we've seen it from DJI, from Holyland, Saramonic. There's many companies making those, but the more traditional high-end audio manufacturers like Sennheiser were very slow to do this. And then Sennheiser announced this actually a while ago already, and we only did the interview at NAB, and they had a more innovative approach in a sense that it's 2 wireless transmitters and 1 receiver that, first of all, I mean, has unfortunately, I have to point this out because it's not a given for a lot of the competitors. It has a locking mini jack port, so you can lock your microphone if you attach a lav. It also has a built-in microphone if you want to use this thing by itself. The logo is quite small, which is good. I mean, there still is a logo, unfortunately.
Imagine what we have to talk about. Yeah, size of the crazy logo. Oh, man. Okay.
And it actually came, like the full system comes with 2 transmitters, and it's kind of in like a plastic box, I would say, that you can use as a microphone. So you kind of insert the 2 microphones, the 2 transmitters into that box, and then you can use it as a standalone mic. And also the the receiver will actually, it's like a housing for the receiver too, which you can just pop out and then attach to your camera.
But the main criticism about this system was actually that it can do only up to 24-bit. So
exactly.
Is there anything new now?
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, they announced that now you can buy just one of these senders and a receiver individually, but that's not the big news. The big news is that they're simply issuing a firmware update, and suddenly all of those systems, the one that was in the market already with the 3 parts, like the 2 senders and the receiver, and the new single channel system, now supports 32-bit float. And I think her name is Caitlin. She already hinted at that in the interview, but she wasn't very specific about it. And now it's out there, and it's a free update. And I have to say, I mean, amazing. Also, price-wise, it's not as expensive as you might have thought something from Sennheiser is, because the full profile wireless system, I think, sets you back around $300 US. And this single channel system is now $200. So it's quite affordable. It's very competitive compared to what's in the market already, and it's from Sennheiser. So yeah. We haven't tested this, but I would expect better audio quality even for the built-in mics.
The way you describe it, I guess that it was already built in mind with 32-bit float recording, but then it's always a matter of licensing. So it can be that's what took a little bit of time and integration, licensing, and so on. And now when it's ready and all sorted out, I'm just surprised that this is a free update.
Yeah, I agree. I guess that's
nice.
It's just simply a sign of why competition is great, right? I mean, you have a lot of other manufacturers now. They probably did some market research and found that maybe, the others are gaining ground here. So we have to have something in this market that's also competitive. And so it's a free update. And like most of the other new systems, it's 32-bit.
So what's next? 33-bit, just to be better than the others? I'm joking.
I think we're
Don't take me seriously.
I think we're good. I don't think we ever need more than 32-bit for audio. What do you say, Felix? He's shaking his head. He's an audio guy, so yeah, he knows. That's.
I have to say that news. I'm working on all my mini documentaries, with 32-bit hard copy recording. So that always gives me the safety of if something happens, and so far I'm loving it. I mean, I will never consider buying any wireless system that doesn't record internally as a backup in 32-bit. That's especially if you're doing documentaries, if you're working alone by yourself and you need some like a peace in mind, that's the only way to go. So you have wireless to your camera, which is usually 24-bit unless you're working with, let's say, Panasonic cameras, which are with the audio attachment, you can record 32-bit internally. Otherwise, it's just normal.
But I think, I just wanted to say that's the one limitation that I think we can still see enhancements, that there will be wireless 32-bit float transmission also within those systems, because even if you use that attachment, you are able to get 32-bit into your camera, but the transmission is not, like usually those systems are not transmitting the 32-bit from the sender to the receiver. They're only transmitting up to 24. So I guess that's, but as long as there are no or hardly any cameras that are able to record 32-bit internally, there's no reason for them to offer that. But I guess we will see this too at some point. I don't know, maybe it's a limitation because they're all Wi-Fi based. So
no, but I spoke to Panasonic and other companies. The limitation is probably the hardware, meaning when that's according to the company. It's not that I have the ability to judge here, but probably by introducing 32-bit audio internal recording, you're also generating more heat and more processing and more of everything. So apparently it's within the capabilities of certain batteries.
I think and a codec thing, there are no video codecs that are actually supporting this yet.
Yeah, but imagine that even if you would get separate audio files, like for example, you can do this with the Osmo Pocket 3, this is still valuable.
Of course. I mean, I totally agree. It's nice to have the backup audio in the transmitter, but you have to remember to copy it. And very often, I think you simply are used to working with what's in the camera. And if you're in the production, it's just one more thing to take care of.
I always compare, because I find some of the cameras that I've been working with lately, when like even new cameras, I simply check the quality of the preamps. So I listen, and then I see if there's too much hiss in the background. I move to the 32-bit float recording. Usually it's much cleaner. Yeah. So that's how I do.
Cool. Good tip. And let's move on. Just brief mention. Of course, now that we have the LUMIX S12 and S12E, there's also cages arriving in the market for this. Tilta announced a new cage for that. What's interesting, of course, I mean, the S12 and the S12E seem to have the exact same measurements as the S1R2.
Yeah, that's
so and that's why this cage also works for all of those cameras. So any cages that were already there will also work with the new cameras. Just keep that in mind, because we know that sometimes there are tiny, tiny differences, but in this case, it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the way it attaches is quite nice. And
how's the price? Competitive?
Easy to move to vertical shooting as well. The price is $69.
Crazy.
For the
basic
half cage.
kit. Yeah.
Well, no, for the full cage actually, for the S1R2 and S12. And there's a base kit with a handle and also base plate and rods for $179. So very, very competitive, of course. I mean, we all know that, there's a lot of
other companies
in the market that are making very competitive prices and with good quality also in the market. So it's also nice that this used to be spent so much money on cages, and this is simply
how it was with
not
me.
The case anymore.
Cages, and then you try to actually build a camera to sit on the shoulder.
Are you still using cages?
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, in the old days, it was trying to bring.
But you also you never use monitors, so you don't need it really.
Yeah, and then I kind of gave it up. I like literally work with the camera. I like to feel it. I like to work with it. It's not that I need too much from it, and that's me. Yeah, but
what has completely stopped, of course. Because we're the old school people who still work with shoulder cameras a lot, and I think for a long time when DSLRs came out, we were all trying to kind of make a shoulder camera out of a DSLR.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly. I have still some Voca stuff and shape stuff. The whole camera was actually on the shoulder with viewfinder, everything, and I went back to basics, and I like to spit blood. I like to work with the camera almost like the way it is, the way the manufacturer intended it to be, and then also when I'm reviewing stuff to see the flows of handling and so on.
As long as there's a viewfinder, right?
For me personally, yes.
Well, also-
you said old school,
Same.
but yeah.
Good. Just want to mention a new educational article we published from Masha about different types of tracking shots and what emotions they evoke. Now, this is a cool article diving into, like good examples from a lot of famous movies where tracking shots have a specific purpose and why they are used. I mean, it's examples from Full Metal Jacket to the running scenes in Licorice Pizza from Paul Thomas Anderson, of course, The Shining and Kill Bill. So a lot of really cool examples, Saving Private Ryan, and what kind of emotions they evoke. So it's really, taking a step back away from the technology, just really trying to find out what purpose does a tracking shot serve for a production and what can you achieve with it emotionally in the viewer, with a lot of very, very good examples. So go check that out if you want to have a bit of a thought about where to use a tracking shot for your next production and where it makes sense and what kind of purpose it will fulfill. So really cool to read about that. Bit of gear news. Laowa announced a 15mm f4.5 0.5x macro lens for full frame.
Interesting combination, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Laowa traditionally, I think, is best known for their wide angle lenses. That's where they really started and becoming, famous, 12, 15 years ago. And yeah, it's almost like back to the roots. Having a 15mm lens that is macro capable is quite cool. I think you can have, you can get just simply very close to things. Of course, they're quite well known for their lenses not to distort too much. So they don't have this fisheye, pincushion, or what's the other one called? The pincushion distortion, barrel distortion. Thank you. And they're very straight. Like even the wide angles are very, very straight, and you can see it in the example video. It just it just gives this immediacy I love using wide angles, super wide angles for a couple of shots, because it just simply gives this immediacy of things
Power.
And a sense of movement. You move it very little and it feels like you're, flying across a football field. So it's nice to have more options here.
I actually recommend to look at the image video that they made for this lens, because it's such a long way that the Chinese companies came to produce such engaging videos like this. It's really very nice. I mean, it's not only them. We've seen it from NANLITE and so many other. It's like crazy. The production value here is really big, and they're doing a great job.
Yeah. And in general, I think, they are the first company I think about when I need a wide angle for anything, because I think their wide angles are just great.
Yeah.
And it's not just the snorkel lens, which is also a wide angle, of course, but any of their wide angles, because they are not distorting, are very, very useful to have in your kit, in my opinion. Yeah. And also in general, it's just very affordable stuff. What are we talking about here? $400 for this lens. Nice to have. Good. Moving on. Panasonic offering, that's just kind of an add-on to last week's news. This is specific to Europe and the UK. They are offering a 5-year extended warranty on LUMIX S cameras, which is amazing. It's kind of a good sign of how much you trust your own products if you're able to extend the warranty like that. So
I think it's basically like with cars. I would always try to buy something that gives me peace in mind for the longest time possible.
Yeah.
And here I wish that more companies would go this way. Of course, it has some financial, it means financially maybe putting a bit more pressure on some companies. But on the other hand, when you do something like this, it really shows that you trust your product, you value it. And I guess, I don't know if that's transferable. I hope it is. So even if somebody buys your camera secondhand.
I think it should be. I think legally it has to be in Europe.
Okay, but then it's really great. And for now, this is only a European initiative. I really hope that Panasonic will consider to do this, even worldwide. Not easy, of course. For people, you always see the brand say, Panasonic, Sony, Fujifilm. It's not a global thing. It always has territories and restrictions and so on, sometimes different laws and so on. But I really hope that the company will be able to extend it to other territories. Do
you think it's limited just to the motor, like with my washing machine? My washing machine has this sticker, 5-year extended warranty, small asterisk. Just the motor. No, I think it's a full camera. And I think you have to register it for the extended warranty. It's for any LUMIX S series model purchased from March 14 this year. And for now, this is limited until the end of next March. So for a year.
Yeah, well done. I mean, really well done here. Hopefully more companies will adopt. Many years ago, I bought a Samsung TV, 5 years warranty. And when I needed it, the company did not respect it.
Okay.
And that was the last time that I bought a Samsung TV or any Samsung product. So I'm just saying it has, I have a memory like an elephant.
Of course, you always have to read the small print here and
okay.
You know how it is.
We don't like small prints.
No. Leica issued firmware updates to the SL3 and SL3S. But there's some cool news for video, right?
Absolutely. So with this firmware update, and by the way, if you would like to see, actually read the SL3S review that we made a while back when the camera was announced, please head to the page. It's also there. And this time they will bring, I think the biggest thing in this firmware update, you will have an addition of new C4K and C6K video recording formats. And now you're able to record in up to 30p in 6K and up to 60p in 4K in ProRes 422 HQ, which alone is a big news. So it's nice to see that the company is actually enhancing the product. And personally, what I would have loved to see is a bit less noise reduction being implemented also in this camera.
You can't turn it off?
From what I remember, it was not possible. And this always led me to a very old conversation with one of the product managers at Leica. When I originally reviewed the SL, the first camera that came out, I don't know how many years it was, and it was so organic. The footage was amazing. And I tried to understand what they did here, and he said that there was simply no noise reduction, which of course made me a bit surprised.
Well, no, I mean, we know that there always is somehow.
I can only quote what he said, and I have it in the email. I have it as a proof that it can be done, and only later on, when companies started to cooperating more with Panasonic, and I think in general, the Japanese mentality is to produce perfect products. That's what they want, or perfect image. And maybe perfect image is equal to noise reduction. Like, let's smooth things up. And that's what I saw also in the LUMIX S1 II, which is a bit of a pity. So apparently every format but RAW will exhibit this extensive noise reduction.
We've seen with many Panasonic cameras.
Yeah, with LUMIX you can go from +5 to 0. You can't go minus, and that's a pity. I mean, I really, for complete transparency, we actually approached Panasonic. We wanted their official response to this. Also to understand if this is a given situation or this is something that they will consider in the future to change a little bit. Let's see. I'm really waiting to hear more from the company.
It's almost like they all need this special mode that kind of gives them an excuse to not have the quote-unquote perfection in the smoothing. I mean, like Sony has this CineEI mode where it's basically in the FX line where it's basically cutting away all the noise reduction. Now but they had the same thing, right? In the beginning, there was noise reduction even in that mode. And I think we and others gave feedback after the original lab test of those cameras, some of those cameras, and then they actually enabled a way to disable it. So we know they can change. Let's hope Panasonic does too.
If any of you, dear manufacturers, are watching this podcast, we don't like noise reduction. If it can be eliminated altogether, great. And if not, please allow us or give us the control to minimize it. So we can choose. Somebody likes
reduce the noise reduction, basically.
Exactly. So reduce that will be plus or minus on the menu. like plus the minus?
That's so confusing. It's like sometimes it's also this setting. It's almost like on the new Mavic 4. You have finally also, by the way, which I guess I also forgot to mention, you can sharpness. You can dial down sharpness, but the way it's displayed in each one of the log modes on all three cameras, and the way it's displayed, it says sharpness, and then you go 0, and then -1, -2. And for me, reading this almost reads like it's 0 should be how it is, right? From the camera. But the reality is there is sharpness applied, because 0 reads to me as if this is what from the sensor comes, and when I do -1 and -2, it's taking away sharpness from the sensor.
So you don't really know if it's you're reducing the sharpness or you're reducing the
quality, the what's in focus, really. And we had, I don't remember which camera manufacturers in the past did it correctly, where 0 was like the default setting was like +2, and then you went down to 0, and then it was like this, and then you could go even further down, and then it would deteriorate the image. It's very confusing. Anyway.
So that's another request. Make it easy for us.
Give us image as close
organic as possible.
Exactly. Like we know that there is no real original on the sensor, but give us something we can always apply noise reduction in post if we want to. We don't need it in camera.
Well, again,
we can have the option.
Exactly.
But I wanted an option. I don't want to be forced to use it. Right?
That's right. And noise in camera is not always, or in the image is not always a bad thing. Especially
when you're shooting log, right? When you shoot log, you don't want noise reduction in general, I think. Okay. Let's move on. OCTOPUS RAW Studio. Now, this is a plugin for Premiere. Now, you might remember we reported about this company, OCTOPUS Cinema, for developing their own camera. And that was in February 24. And there was a prototype announced, the OCTOPUS 16 Super 16 sensor camera. It looks a little bit like a GoPro, to be honest, at least on the images. And it's a little bit like a big GoPro.
It's hard to determine the size. No, there's nothing next to it.
Well, there's a laptop. Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's like 3 GoPros on top of each other. But anyway, I haven't heard from that company since then. But now they announced a plugin for Premiere, which is actually quite cool, because for those of you working with raw footage in Premiere, you might know that the ProRes RAW support is a little bit limited in Premiere. You cannot change the white balance or ISO.
I would summarize, you cannot.
You cannot. You can do some stuff. I think some stuff is possible, but a lot of the options are not there.
True.
And this plugin enables you to do that. ProRes RAW in Premiere, you can finally change white balance, you can change ISO, you can change exposure index, and even highlight recovery. So it gives you the options you have in Final Cut Pro for ProRes RAW also in Premiere.
Now you tell me, why do we need an external plug-in in order to do this? Why Adobe is not coming with this by themselves? I'm serious now.
Why do we need to work with Adobe Premiere when we have options that don't cost you an arm and a leg every month, like DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's weird. Of course, there's advantages to Premiere. There's a lot of things that they are innovating on in terms of, the AI functions and stuff like that, which are only slowly coming to DaVinci and other NLEs. But still, we sometimes feel neglected on some areas, right?
But at least it gives business possibilities and opportunities to third-party companies to come up with something.
So, of course, you have Apple with Final Cut supporting ProRes RAW because they develop ProRes RAW and any ProRes codec. And then you have Blackmagic with Blackmagic RAW. And I think it maybe just leaves Adobe in between and being not here, not there, not having native support of either.
But then that's why you have Nikon NRAW, which was actually developed by Intupix company, Tico RAW, if I'm not if I remember the company's name correctly. And that allows, when you use a Nikon camera, you can either use this type of RAW in both systems. So you can use another RAW, because ProRes RAW on DaVinci Resolve is not possible. So you can use the NRAW on the Blackmagic Design camera. So you get greater flexibility.
You mean if you shot something in Blackmagic RAW on the camera?
If you shot with Nikon camera, if you shoot with ProRes RAW, you cannot work on, but if you still want, if you have DaVinci Resolve and you still want to shoot RAW with Nikon cameras, just use the NRAW.
Yeah, but I mean, it's only Nikon cameras.
That's right. But this is a good good solution. At least a camera manufacturer that give you a solution to work with both.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, Blackmagic has an interest to get people to use DaVinci. So, but yeah, I mean, it's cool to have OCTOPUS RAW to get better RAW controls, and I think it's around €100. Yeah, for a full unlimited version with lifetime access, which is great. No subscription.
Yeah.
So $100 gives you that access. Quite a good find. And yeah, let's move on to a nice video interview Graham Sheldon did with Steadicam operator Sean Flannery. Now, he's a guy who's a very high-end Steadicam operator who's working on a lot of very big, high-profile live shows. Most notably, probably the Super Bowl halftime show. And it's a very, very interesting half-hour interview that Graham did here. And I really recommend all of you to watch it because he has some very, very interesting anecdotes from his work life. And, you know, like the kind of things that can go wrong in these type of environments are crazy. For example, he points out how often he dripped in front of Beyonce. He was the guy also accompanying Ryan Gosling on stage for the Oscar win when he sang the Barbie song, you know, like I'm just Ken. And he even his hand is in shot because Ryan Gosling is just gripping his hand. And I think we have it actually here if you watch the video version.
But this is the time that he had to run from one side of the center to the other one. It was really crazy how.
Yeah. He really had to be spontaneous. Yeah, he's holding his hand. And it's it's really.
My wife would love to become a Steadicam operator if she knew.
Next to Ryan Gosling?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really cool interview. And just give it a listen or watch it. It's really worth checking out because it's so rare that we get those insights from, you know, sometimes you get interviews with the DPs or directors of such productions, but kind of like the operators are the ones who are really close to the talent and are doing a lot of the groundwork on the days. And of course, they are actually the closest to the talent. So, you know, like he can speak from experience how it is to work with Taylor Swift and Ryan Gosling and Beyonce and how it is being part of those huge productions that really hundreds of millions of people watch live sometimes. Incredible if you think about the pressure here. If you know, like you are doing a live thing and you're like, 127 million people are watching my image right now. It's like, better don't
focus.
mess
Stay
it up.
Focused.
Exactly.
Don't fall down.
It's it's a really cool interview. Put the link in the show notes, like everything else, of course, and check that out. Good. Moving on to a little bit of gear news again. Nothing major, but NANLITE announced a Bowens mount projection attachment, 25 to 45 degree, for a lot of their lights. It will work with, let me check which ones of the lights. I think it's the FS and FC series, if I'm not mistaken. And you can use them. You don't need a yoke. It's lightweight, which is great. So you can just put it in front. There are gobos for it. There are different gels for it. And it just gives you a very easy way to have a projection attachment for some special effects and, you know, this typical kind of follow light look. If you want to put the Batman sign and just, you know, onto the clouds or whatever, this is definitely possible with this. But it's not one of those huge things which need an extra yoke.
Do we have the price for this? Because that looks very useful, especially if you're doing stage stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be $389. It's also going to be on display at CineGear. So maybe you'll check it out. I don't know when you're there. But yeah, it's easy, and it works with a whole series of their lights, which is great, of course. Like if you have already a couple of their lights, it's good to be flexible here. And yeah, it's also zoomable, so you can change, of course, the size of the projection. Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Last bit of news. Again, we had a beta update to DaVinci Resolve 20. This time they are bringing some targeted improvements that are specifically about the animation workflow and remote collaboration capabilities. In any case, if you are working with a beta version of DaVinci Resolve, I would try to always keep it updated, because I recommend actually not using this for production, right? I wouldn't use the beta versions, at least not the early betas for production. And when I say early beta versions, we usually see the final release around September time. So it's still a couple months away. So I'm sure we will see at least 3-4 other beta releases until then. And but it's worth checking out. If you are in the beta cycle, you should update, because they see significant improvements, and also they are adding new functions to each beta release based on feedback that they get. And for example, in this case, the remote monitoring for Windows system has been enhanced, and it's more compatible now with AMD CPUs as well. So, there's a lot of groundwork here that sometimes you install a beta version and you expect something to work and it doesn't work. It's a beta, right? And then people give feedback, and a week later they push another update. So don't use it for production, but if you want to get familiar and be ready for using it with a final version come September, then it's a good thing to check out. The Curves editor gets clip handles now, and better easing control, which is good, because we all know that working with curves can be a little bit tricky. Sometimes it jumps a little bit too much if you're working with keyframes. So there seems to be more refined way of working with keyframes now, which is good. But yeah, anyway, I do not recommend using this for production work. If you are interested in learning more about DaVinci Resolve, we have a lot of very, very extensive courses on DaVinci Resolve in MZ, our education subscription platform, and many, many hours of learning DaVinci inside and out, specifically the color, the grading workflows and also the editing workflows, but we are also touching Fairlight Audio and Fusion. So go check that out on MZ for specifically the newest course, beginner's course to DaVinci Resolve. And I think here we can wrap it up.
Yeah, it was a long episode. At least it feels like a long episode.
It's never good. If it feels long, it probably was.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode. It's going to be an exciting week next week with a new camera release. We can't say more yet, but there is going to be something new. And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, leave a good rating, send us a comment at podcast@cined.com, and thanks for watching.
Thank you.